Last night, as I slumbered, I had a strange dream where federal agents were warning people that if they maintained their political opinions, they would be targeted and accused of crimes and they'd be arrested. When I wake up, I see this story. It actually came out the other day from Breitbart. Biden administration asks Americans to report potentially radicalized friends and family. If you see something, say something. We know all too well the dangers of snitching on your neighbors. I know somebody from Ukraine. She was telling me the story about how where she lived in this apartment, there's an old story, a common story actually, that the neighbors were feuding during the Cold War. How do you deal with a neighbor who's arguing over your floor mat or you're playing music or you're having friends over or whatever? You call the police and say they were disparaging the Communist Party. The next day, the apartment was empty and that individual was gone. That's where it feels like we're heading. Apparently now the FBI believes that white supremacists and militia groups are the biggest threat this country faces. Now, normally I wouldn't care all that much as I'm not in a militia and I'm certainly not a white supremacist. In fact, I actually deplore white supremacists. The problem is, as you know, they've changed the definition of what white supremacist is. And now they're going to be seeking to instill equity in all levels of government. It's not just that they're going to go after anybody who believes in classical liberalism. They are going to use the full weight of the federal government to instill identitarianism, government based on race and identity. They're going to bring us back to the pre-civil rights era. This is what the leftists want. And boy, is it shocking to see Biden administration asking Americans to report their family. There it is. You know, are we frogs boiling in a pot? I think so. At what point do people say it's crossed the line? Now, Tucker Carlson has an interesting theory, one that he's asserting is fact I don't completely agree with, but should be talked about anyway. On Tucker Carlson's show, he says FBI operatives were organizing the attack on the Capitol. Basically, what he's saying is that several of the people who were listed in the indictments are called unnamed co-conspirators. He says, if the FBI knows who they are, why aren't they being indicted as well? Well, clearly they must be FBI agents, not necessarily agents or operatives, maybe informants, or there could be a lot of reasons. Maybe they're not informants. Maybe they just snitched. Maybe the FBI came to them and they said, "I'll give you all the names of everybody for some kind of immunity agreement." Regardless, though, Tucker Carlson believes that much of the organizing of January 6th came from federal agents. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the left has been saying that the entire time about their riots. And you know what? Maybe they're right. Maybe the reason that so many Antifa who get caught burning down buildings or throwing Molotovs, the reason they get cut loose is because maybe they're working for the federal government. At the very least, maybe they're informants for the federal government. That's scary stuff, what we're seeing. We are seeing a government that wants you to snitch on your neighbors. We know where this goes. A few years ago, when I said we were headed towards some kind of civil war and people didn't believe me, and maybe many still don't, do you think when we're at the point where the federal government is saying snitch on your own family members, that maybe we're getting to some really insane moment in history? Maybe they're right, though. Maybe there won't be a civil war because it's over already. The conflict is lost. We'll see how it plays out with the 2024 election. But why should I have any faith in this system at all? Joe Biden is seemingly out of his mind. He pulled out flashcards during his meeting with Putin. It's bad. Here's a story from Breitbart. They say, President Joe Biden's administration announced their plans to create ways for Americans to report radicalized friends and family to the government in an effort to fight domestic terror. In a conversation with reporters, one senior administration official explained the importance of stopping politically fueled violence before it started. We will work to improve public awareness of federal resources to address concerning or threatening behavior before violence occurs. The official cited the Department of Homeland Security "If You See Something, Say Something" campaign to help stop radical Islamic terror as a domestic possibility. This involves creating contexts in which those who are family members or friends or coworkers know that there are pathways and avenues to raise concerns and seek help for those who they have perceived to be radicalizing and potentially radicalizing towards violence, the official said. Biden began his presidency with a stark warning in his inaugural speech about the rise in political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terror, that we must confront and we will defeat. On June 1st, Biden described the threat from white supremacy as the most lethal threat to the homeland today. The Biden administration said it would also work with large technology companies on increased information sharing to combat radicalization. Any particular tech company often knows its own platform very well, the official noted. But the government sees things, actually threats of violence across platforms. They see the relationship between online recruitment, radicalization, and violence in the physical world. The Department of Homeland Security also plans to deploy digital literacy and digital fitness programs to help combat malicious content online that bad actors deliberately try to disseminate. The official reassured reporters that the administration's new strategies would remain laser focused on stopping violent acts. This is a strategy that is agnostic as to political ideology or off the spectrum. The official said, "What matters is when individuals take their political or rather grievances and or other grievances and turn that unacceptably, unlawfully into violent action." The official added, the Biden administration was taking the threat of domestic terror seriously and would redirect the focus of intelligence agencies on internal threats. "We are investing many agencies of the government and resourcing them appropriately and asking our citizens to participate, because ultimately this is really about Homeland Security being a responsibility of each citizen of our country to help us achieve." All right. Well, when you combine that with this notion from Merrick Garland that white supremacy is the worst threat in this country, we know where where they're aiming. See, right now, if you go back a few years, the left was screaming that white supremacy was taking over this country, that fascists were rising again, and that's just objectively false and makes absolutely no sense. Then you get now the AG coming out and saying basically the same thing, but it is just absolutely fake news. They push the fake news. The government adopts the fake news because when they tell the lie often enough, it becomes the truth. People believe it. It's like the left says. They believe there is no truth but power. So without objective reality, without knowing what the actual problems are, they confuse, they manipulate, and then here you go. The problem is white supremacy. In this tweet from Kyle Becker, he shows AG Merrick Garland saying, "In the FBI's view, the top domestic violent extremist threat comes from racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically those who advocate for the superiority of the white race." Kyle says there are literally no credible statistics to back this up. And then he includes this chart. Here are the incidents listed for violent white supremacy attacks according to the Jigsaw Project. There are 6 such incidents in 2020. In a nation of 330 million people, what's missing? 0 incidents of far left, despite months of Antifa rioting and BLM rioting. And there you go. But something that we all have come to expect at this point. So how long until your friend or family member, maybe you've got a friend or family member, they're Biden supporters, and you try talking to them about reality. You try mentioning about Antifa or Black Lives Matter riots. And they say, oh no, he's saying the thing. And then they call the FBI. And the FBI comes and gives you a visit and says, "What's this we hear about your opinions, sir?" Now, of course, we have a First Amendment in this country, but it doesn't seem to matter at this point. The federal government has outsourced the censorship of political opinion to big tech companies. The Democrats are 100% on board with this. Okay, I should say 90% on board with it, because there are some that understand the importance of free speech, though I don't understand why they'd still remain Democrats. So this is what's going to happen. Your speech will be censored. It'll be censored by a private corporation. Your finances will be stripped from you. You will have no resources, and it'll be done by private corporations. Hey, you know what? Republicans deserve some of this blame as well. But to be fair, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party today are not the exact same as they were 5-10 years ago. The Republican Party today is dramatically different. And the Democratic Party is pretty different, but only because neocons joined the Democrats when they realized Trump was taking over the Republican Party. But yeah, for the longest time, the Republicans and conservatives overlooked the problem that was massive multinational corporations. Now the federal government can utilize them to violate the Constitution. But hey, the government's not the one doing it. Here's the story from Tucker Carlson. I'll give some pushback, but this is important. Daily Mail reports Tucker Carlson claimed Tuesday that the Capitol rioters who were named as unindicted co-conspirators in court documents were actually federal agents orchestrating the attack. Carlson on Tuesday night referenced a report in Revolver News, which looked into the indictments of the around 400 people charged over the January 6th unrest. More than 2,000 criminal charges have been filed against 411 suspects, including hundreds of felonies such as assaulting officers and trespassing with a weapon. Carlson noted that many of the indictments mentioned unidentified co-conspirators. Without fail, the government has thrown the book at most people who were present and in the Capitol on January 6th. There was a nationwide dragnet to find them. Many of them are still in solitary confinement tonight. One man apparently appeared in court having been tortured, brutally beaten. Nobody cared. The judge didn't care. It's a dangerous time, my friends. You know, I think of that old poem, right? First they came for the socialists, then they came for the trade unionists, they came for the teachers, et cetera, et cetera. And, and eventually there was no one left to speak out for me. I don't actually care to defend in 99.99% of the circumstances anything having to do with a white supremacist. I think they're deplorable people with deplorable opinions. They're awful people. However, that 0.01% is their right to free speech. Making up everything about them, I don't care for. But they have a right to speak, and I am worried, as I've stated before. I did an interview with one of these with Oliver Darcy of CNN now, who is just a propagandist, fake news. He pumps out lies. And I said that it was dangerous that big tech was censoring the alt-right because you go for someone's opinion. You go for one group. We've learned that lesson from history. It's only a matter of time before they go for the next group. And guess what? It's been true every step of the way. So right now, as the government goes after white supremacist extremists, many of us will simply say, well, good, we don't want the violence. And to be fair, yeah, absolutely. If they're trying to stop the violence, then I actually am absolutely fine with this. If they're violent extremists in any way that want to hurt people, then sure, lock them up. But I don't believe the government's going to stop at that. I believe it's going to be like pre-crime. And I'm worried about this trend that we're seeing. What happens when they start? Let me slow down. It's that white supremacy doesn't just mean you are a Klan member. It could literally mean that you're a math teacher. No joke. You're a math teacher and you push back against critical race theory, so they say you are a white supremacist. You see where this goes. Eventually, they start saying that everybody is, and they use it as justification for spying on people. Maybe you're a classical liberal of sorts. You believe in the vision of the founding fathers. Maybe you're a social liberal, someone who would have been a Democrat 10 years ago, and now you're confused as to where your party is. Well, they'll say you're a white supremacist. Then, because of this massive national dragnet, you will get the federal government, federal agents spying on you and looking for anything they can use against you. Because, well, now you're a white supremacist, right? They've changed the definition. A lot of people often say, look, if I don't do anything wrong, why should I be worried about this? Because everything you do is wrong. You realize that, right? Look at Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to Trump. He was at an informal meeting at the White House, apparently just hanging out. And they asked him some questions, and he made a misstatement. They said it was a lie. He said it was a misstatement or whatever. Regardless, it wasn't a formal meeting. He wasn't informed that he was being investigated. But as soon as he said something that wasn't true for whatever reason, they charged him criminally. They threatened his family. They said they'd go after his son. We are dealing with evil people. They are in our government. They are deeply entrenched. And it's only getting worse. I don't have the solutions. I think we absolutely have to. I think first and foremost, I can tell you this. Building culture, which is why, again, timcast.com, we're expanding. We're going to be writing news articles and producing content because we need to change hearts and minds. You win the people over, this stops immediately. As soon as people no longer have confidence in these systems. That's why the media is so important. That's why the lies are so important. Right now, there's an NBC News reporter claiming, and it's the most hilarious paradoxical garbage, that critical race theory isn't even being taught in schools. Like, why are conservatives even acting like critical race theory is in schools? In her story, she actually points to several dozen instances and over 100 parent groups that are currently in disputes in schools over critical race theory. And she says they're just making it up. That's right. That's the brazen lie of the mainstream media, that you can have dozens of instances where the fight is literally happening and they say, no, it's not happening. Imagine the kind of deranged conspiracy theorist you'd have to be to look at 50 different schools where there's fights over getting rid of critical race theory. And then you're like, but that's so dumb because critical race theory is not even happening. Hey, wait a minute. If there are 50 battles going on, maybe it's because it is happening. No, I'm sorry. All of these hundreds or thousands of parents who are concerned about this, they just watch Fox News and they're all confused now. That's what really happened. That makes the most amount of assumptions possible. The simple solution is just that parents saw something they didn't like and started complaining about it. How about that? That's what the media does. They propagandize and they lie. They'll claim these parents are white supremacists. And then what? How many more months, how many years until the FBI is targeting these individuals, saying, well, they're potential domestic extremists. I mean, you look at the people who are their friends and family, and they reported them. Let me get back to Tucker Carlson things. I'm getting off track again, but I'll point out, I certainly think so. It'll happen. Look, they banned Milo and Laura Loomer and Alex Jones and a bunch of other people because they know that these people support Trump. They know that these people are prominent figures who will rally people to vote for Trump, and they got rid of them. So what do you think they're going to start doing to Trump's actual voter base? I think they're going to go down the line. Thought leaders. They'll target thought leaders, people who are not necessarily prominent, high-profile individuals, local influence, people of influence. Let's read more. Tucker Carlson mentions, strangely, some of the key people participating in January 6 have not been charged. Carlson pointed to the case of Thomas Caldwell, a 66-year-old former naval officer who allegedly conspired with members of the Oath Keepers. Caldwell's charging documents say that he spent the night before the riot in the same hotel as Person 2. Another individual, Person 3, led Caldwell to believe there would be a quick reaction force participating in storming the Capitol. But wait, here's the interesting thing. Person 2 and Person 3 were organizers of the riot. The government knows who they are, but the government has not charged them. Why is that? You know why. They were almost certainly working for the FBI. So FBI operatives were organizing the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, according to government documents. Whoa. I got to slow you down there, Tucker boy. That's not what it says. And that's a big jump. You know why they were almost certainly working for the FBI. He then said, so FBI operatives were organizing. Well, we don't know that for sure, but I can tell you this. Tucker's logic is sound. Just clean up your language. If you have two people who lie to some random guy and convince him that something big is going to happen and he should act, and then they're not charged, they're working with the FBI. I think that absolutely makes sense. We don't know for sure, though. Maybe they're just, maybe they were Antifa. How about I say this? Why weren't they charged? Well, because they were Antifa trying to coax Trump supporters into conflict. And the Fed said, well, they weren't actually, part of the riot, so not going to be charged. They could be informants regardless. It seems like they really were FBI agents, and Tucker Carlson is correct. I'm not a fan of the definitive statement. But Carlson said that there were more than 20 unindicted co-conspirators mentioned in the Oath Keeper indictments, all playing roles in the conspiracy who have not been charged for virtually the exact same activities. So I'll tell you this. When you see a post and someone says that there should be violence, that person's a Fed. It's very obvious because we're in fourth and fifth generational warfare. That's what I've been saying for some time. So I'll point this out too. Over at patriots.win, it's really fascinating to see the comments about me when they call me names or insult me. I'm sure there are a lot of Trump supporters who hate me, but it's interesting that some of the criticism is that I oppose violence. Yeah, that's right. They're probably Feds. We are in fourth and fifth generational warfare. You do not win a battle by being violent. Antifa gets away with it because they control cultural institutions and the flow of information. That is a propaganda war. That is fourth and fifth generational warfare. For people on the right, you so much as sneeze on a Capitol officer and they're going to scream insurrection. Strange. I assume most Trump supporters would know that. And that's why the strategy isn't working, doesn't work, and you can't engage in these behaviors. And anybody advocating for anything of the sort, they're probably a Fed. It's funny because people have said, Tim says that, the violence doesn't work, but then he tells people to stand up and fight back. What's he trying to say here? Clearly, I mean, figuratively fight back in terms of protest and boycotts and non-compliance, things like that. Nonviolent civil disobedience. But more importantly, peaceful, resourceful, and persuasive. That's why we're building culture. That's why I'm building skate parks. That's why we're filming a vlog. We want people to have fun and be inspired, but move away from the indoctrination of propaganda and the mainstream media. Now, I'll tell you about that strange dream I mentioned, starting the segment off. In this dream, there were basically federal agents putting pressure on people of influence and channels insinuating that they were inciting violence, or they were, the opinions they held were very clearly incitements to violence and things like that. And you forget dreams, kind of vague, but the general idea was the government decided to weed out anybody who dare oppose them. And so in their quest to shut down domestic extremists, they go to people of prominence and just say, you're not an extremist, are you? Because we'd have to come and seize all your computers and shut you down. Why don't you say these things? Why don't you talk about this? You might not believe in, you might agree that violence is wrong and won't solve the problem because they're waiting for that to remove people and activists and voters. I mean, think about it. You get a Trump supporter who says something dumb on the internet, they'll arrest you in 2 seconds. It will not work. When you are the resistance, you cannot be overtly calling for these things. And even these strategies just don't work because it smears the rest of the voter bloc. You need to be persuasive. You need to win the information war. That's what's happening. But I think about what's happening. Think about what Merrick Garland wants and what the FBI is doing, what Biden's administration is saying about snitching on your neighbor. They're going to come after people who are political influencers. It starts with private organizations. It starts with, Alex Jones and Milo Yiannopoulos. It starts with their companies. Eventually, it comes with lawsuits that are well funded by powerful interests. And, it's not the federal government. So, no, but it's massive power structures. Eventually, it will be the federal government. There were already reports that the FBI was looking into several prominent Trump supporters who were at the rally, not the riots, because they're going to try to find a way. They don't want Trump to win in 2024. We've already seen they will do anything by any means necessary to stop Donald Trump. So what do you think happens when Biden screws everything up? Trump is going to come back out. They might arrest Trump. They're in New York, they're talking about indicting him. And they'll say, you can't run for president. You're under an indictment or something. This is going to be, I think it's going to get bad, but we'll see. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.